So Rav Haigon is touching on a qualitative difference between the normal Hallel that we say and the Pesach Hallel that we say. And we're going to see from tonight that that Hallel is core to the whole Seder. Everything revolves around that Hallel. Good evening, everybody, and a good Chodesh. Good to see you. It's a cold night once again in Yerushalayim. I think last time was also very cold. Happy to have you here with us. The shir is in the Schus of Refuah Shlema for Elisha Shlomo ben Rachel Malke, whose father is a regular member of the shir, but is with his son who isn't well, and we wish him a Refuah Shlema. Also, I just want to mention how grateful we are to you, Binyamin, and your wife. We come and everything's organized, and the venue is organized, and the refreshments which Binyamin's wife takes care of, and we appreciate that very much, and it makes such a difference. So we appreciate it a lot. The way the shir works, I need to give you a little bit of the background here. Rabbi Cook here makes up the titles. I've got to tell you the truth as to how it works, because he asks me for a title weeks before the shir. Now, those of you who know me know that I prepare the shir within 24 hours of the shir, because otherwise I always say it's stale. Like if you prepare a shir a week ago or 3 days ago, it's stale. It's like buying bread that's 3 days old. What do you want it for? You need to know the shir has to be prepared in the moment. What's going on in the world? What's going on in the country? What's going on in my head? What's going on in your lives? It's got to be current. If a shir isn't current, then it's old stuff. So when they ask me for a title weeks before the shir, it's a little bit of a problem. So Reb Simcha gives a title, and then I try and build a shir around the title. So hence the title of tonight's shir. And now for the main course, roast lamb. So that's what we have to talk. So I'm not talking about the roast lamb so much, or the main course, or even the Korban Pesach per se, as much as the 14th of Nissan, the day when the Korban Pesach was brought, the day before Pesach, which is a very unusual day. And even today, although we don't bring a Korban Pesach, it has certain aspects of unusualness every year. This year it's particularly complex because of Shabbos, but it's an interesting day at any time. Now, what's interesting is last Rosh Chodesh Nissan, we had a shir, and what I spoke about was that Nissan was a turning point, and that all the hardship we endured up till that time, during Adar, which is the time of salvation, of good fortune, and then moving into Nissan. Adar, the period of Nes Nistar, of hidden miracles, and Nissan, the period of open miracles. I talked about the fact, you might remember, some of you, that we were going into a period of open miracle. That was just before April the 12th, which is when the Iranians showered us with their missiles. And from then on, we've seen a series of Nisim. Of course, we still have a lot of tragedy, we still have hardship, we still have loss, and we still mourn for the people we lost. We feel terrible pain for the people who've been wounded, and we feel unbelievable pain for the people who are still hostages in Gaza. But there have been amazing miracles since last Nissan. The last year we've seen amazing miracles. And what we've got to look at today is not so much the looking forward in the sense of, please give us miracles, which is where we were last year, to thank you for the miracles you've given us. So it's a different perspective this Nissan from last Nissan. Some of you might remember, I think some of you are old enough to remember, the 1970 movie based on Eric Siegel's Love Story book. And you remember the famous line from Love Story? Love means never having to say you're sorry, which was one of the most terrible things that was ever put out. And it was a slogan for a while, because really love means always being able to say you're sorry. And sorry is not an easy word to say. There are 3 words that are very difficult to say. One is sorry, to say it in a way that one really means it. And the other is please, to say it in a way one really means it. Please means I plead with you. I can't do this without you. And we find that difficult to say. And thank you is a hoda'ah. Hoda'ah comes from vidui. Vidui means an acknowledgement, a confession. I couldn't have done this without you. And we don't like saying those things because it exposes vulnerability. And we don't like to be vulnerable. We think it puts us at a disadvantage. It opens up the possibility of being exploited, so we usually avoid that. But those are three very, very important words, hard to say and critically important in any relationship and in business and in life generally and in our relationship to Hashem. What more important is there than to say in tefillah, please, Ribbono Shel Olam, we need you? What's there more important to say in Hallel and the other opportunities we have of Hoda'ah, thank you, the Ribbono Shel Olam, the first part of the last part of the Shemona Esrei, the Psukei de Zimra that we say every day, Ashrei that we say 3 times a day, and certainly Hallel that we say when we say thank you, Hashem, and Tshuva. So I'm sorry, Hashem, for what I've done. Those 3 words are words we use in our avodas Hashem on a daily basis. And last Nissan we talked about the please. This Nissan we need to talk about the thank you and also the sorry. We're not behaving the way we ought to be behaving as a nation, and we need to take responsibility for that. In understanding the issue of the shir tonight, and a lot of what I'm going to say tonight has been stimulated by a magnificent shir given by Rav Ozer, who is the Rosh Yeshiva at Itri Yeshiva here, and he gave this shir in 2008. He gave a Shabbos HaGodel shir on the 14th of Nissan, and on the relationship between Hallel and the Korban Pesach. So when I got this very difficult title of the Korban Pesach, I was stimulated by some of the teachings of Rav Ozer. And starting off with a piece in the Haggadah that we say just before the meal. B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every single generation, including our own, of course, you have to look at yourself as if you yourself came out of Mitzrayim. That's a very hard ask, to be able to go back in history and see yourself in that situation. Shene'emar, and that's a mitzvah in the Torah. The Haggadah tells us, V'higadata levincha bayom ahu lemor, you shall tell your child on that day, saying, Ba'avu zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeiti miMitzrayim. That's what you've got to say to the child who asks. We say, Hashem did this to me when I came out of Egypt. We don't say Hashem did this to our fathers. We don't say Hashem did this to the Jewish people. We say Hashem did it to me. And that's not a lie. So if we're saying that, that's what we've got to feel. Shelo et avotenu bilvad g'ala kadosh baruch hu. Because the Ribbono Shel Olam did not only redeem our forefathers. We say this out. We say this in the Haggadah. Ela af otanu ga'al imahem. He redeemed us together with them. Shene'emar, as it says, V'otanu hotzi misham leman avi otanu latet lanu et ha'aretz asher nishba'ra avotenu. And Hashem brought us out from there in order to give us this land of Eretz Yisrael. And then the Haggadah goes on and says, Lefichach. And that's why anachnu chayavim lehodot leHallel. We have to give thanks and give Hallel. That's an interesting comment. L'shabeach, l'va'er, etc. V'nomar lefanecha shira chadasha haleluka. And we'll say Hallel, the shira chadasha, and then we go into Hallel. What's the lefichach? Do we only say Hallel for things that we experienced? Do we not say Hallel for things that our forefathers experienced? Sukkot, we don't say that we were in the Sukkot, our forefathers were in the Sukkot, but we say Hallel. Chanukah, we weren't at the miracle, we weren't part of it, it was the Chashmonaim and the people who lived at that time. We weren't part of that miracle, but we still say Hallel. Why does the Haggadah say lefichach, and that's why you've got to say Hallel? As if, and if you yourself was not taken out of Egypt, and we've got to understand what that means, but if you don't see yourself and feel yourself as having come out of Egypt yourself, you can't say Hallel on behalf of your forefathers. That's not how the Hallel works. Why is it? What does that mean? Why can't we say Hallel in commemoration of something that took place a long time ago, even if we ourselves were not directly involved? The second question is saying Hallel at night, which is unusual, and that's not the time that Hallel should be said. But on Pesach night, we say it at night. Some people say it in shul, and it's become a popular minhag. It's not our minhag to say Hallel in shul on Pesach night, but we certainly say Hallel at the table, at the Seder table. Why do we say it at night? We sit down. Whenever we say Hallel, normally we stand up. For this Hallel, we sit down. We interrupt the Hallel with a meal. Imagine Hallel in shul. You do Hallel on Sukkot, on Rosh Chodesh, or on Shavuos, and you stop in the middle and say, let's have Kiddush now, and we'll carry on with Hallel after the Kiddush. That would be crazy. You wouldn't do that, but we do it on Pesach night. In the middle of the Hallel, we stop, we have a big meal, and we talk and have a good time, and then we get back to it and we continue the Hallel. How is that and why is that? And we don't make a bracha before Hallel, which is interesting. What's interesting also is we're saying Hallel before the miracle happened. So we're saying Hallel, and so did they, because they said Hallel at the Korban Pesach. They said Hallel when they shechted the Korban Pesach, and they said Hallel when they ate the Korban Pesach. When did they shech the Korban Pesach? They slaughtered the Korban Pesach on the 14th. There was no Yetzias Mitzrayim yet. They were still slaves. And even in the nighttime when they were eating, they were not out of Mitzrayim yet, and they're already saying Hallel. What are they saying Hallel for? And why are we saying Hallel in the night of the 15th, which is before midnight, it's before the Makas B'choros, it's before the whole thing happened? Why would it be? It's all very, very strange. So there's an important run in Psachim. The run brings Rav Hai Gaon. So this is going back to the time of the Gaonim, where he writes a tshuva about whether you make a bracha on Hallel at the Seder. And he says, She'ein mevarchin al Hallel shebeleilei Psachim, ligmor et Hallel. You don't make a bracha before Hallel on Seder night. She'ein anu kor'im oto betorat korin, ela betorat omer shira. Rav Hai Gaon says an amazing idea, a new idea, that the Hallel we say at the Seder is a completely different Hallel from the Hallel we say in Shul. The Hallel we say on Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh is called Kriyat Hallel, Likro et Hallel. That's the reading of the Hallel. This is Torat Omer Shira. This is called saying a shira. Now, in Rav Hai Gaon, what's interesting in his language is not only that one is Korin and one is Shira, one is reading and one is singing, it's also interesting the difference between Korin and Omer, but Torat Omer Shira. What is the difference between Korin and Omer? How would you define that difference? You read the Hallel, this is not a case of reading Hallel, this is a case of saying song, of saying poetry. What's the difference between saying and reading? Yeah, this is your field. The one is conversation, and the other is scripted, right? Scripted. That's the issue. Is this scripted or not? Do you have a teleprompter or not? Are you just talking from your heart, or do you have a teleprompter? So, Torat Korin, says Rav Hai Gaon, the normal Hallel is scripted. It's a formula that you've got to say. And you say it, you read it from the Siddur, and you say it. Now, Pesach night, it's the same Hallel. You're also reading it from the Siddur and you're saying the same word, but it's not meant to be said as scripted. Not meant to be said that way. It's meant to be said as Omer Shira. And the difference also between Korin is something you say, and Shira is something you sing. And you can't sing if you don't have a script and it's going to be a song. It's got to come from you, from inside you. So Rav Hai Gaon is touching on a qualitative difference between the normal Hallel that we say and the Pesach Hallel that we say. And we're going to see from tonight that Hallel is core to the whole Seder. Everything revolves around that Hallel. We tend to, by the time we get to Hallel, we think we've done the Seder and we're ready for the meal. Let's just get through these couple of paragraphs of Hallel and get to the Charoises and the Morah and the Tiras Yadayim and the Alachiras Matzah, and let's get to the meal and start enjoying ourselves. No, this is the crux of the entire Seder, is those moments of Hallel. And to understand that it's Torat Shir, Shikach Shaninu Rabban Gamliel Omer, Sefer Lefichach Anu Chayavim Lohodot Ulahallel. That's what Rabban Gamliel says, and we've just read it just before this piece in the Haggadah. Right? Therefore, we are obligated Lohodot Ulahallel. It's because of everything that's been. Now comes the chiyuv. Now, this the obligation? Isn't the obligation to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim? Isn't the mitzvah d'oraisa to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim, which we've been doing for the whole evening? Now we're just saying Hallel. That's kind of the end of it. No, says Rav Hai Gaon. Anachnu chayavin. This is the chiyuv. This is the obligation of the night to read this Hallel, and we'll understand why it's so core in a moment. But to get to a deeper understanding of what this Hallel is, I want to try and understand better, what is this Hallel? So it's not the normal Korinit Hallel, it's not the normal Hallel that we do in Yom Tov. It's something different. It's Torat Omer Shira, says Rav Hai Gaon. What does that really mean? There's a wonderful sefer called Emek Bracha, written by Reb Aryeh Pomeranchik. Reb Aryeh Pomeranchik Have you ever come across Rabbi of Ohr Ra'anan? Have you ever heard of him? Rabbi of Ohr Ra'anan died very young. He died at 32. And he was an amazing Talmid Chacham. He was born in Brisk and became very close to the Brisker Rov and continued being a Talmid of the Brisker Rov when he was in Yerushalayim, when they both were in Yerushalayim. But he was also a very close Talmid of the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish and the Brisker Rov had two very different worldviews. There were very few people who were close Talmidim of both. You kind of had to make a choice. You're either going to go Chazon Ish route or you're going to go Brisker Rov route. And somehow Rabbi of Ohr Ra'anan managed to synthesize and to do that. And he wrote this wonderful Sefer Emek Brocha, in which he has an essay on Hallel for Nisim. And he asks such a fundamental question. He says, why do we say Hallel only for miracles? What about the daily miracles? Why don't we say Hallel for every sunrise and every sunset? Why don't we say Hallel for our good health? Why don't we say Hallel for the food that we've got, for the air that we breathe? There's so many miracles every day. Why do we say Hallel for only for the Nisim Geluyim? And he says because the idea of Hallel for Hallel, and then he proves it, is there needs to be two elements. There needs to be thanks for having received something and acknowledgement of the Rebbeinu Shem's wonder. Then there is Shira. Just to say thank you, that's something that can become quite routine, and that's not what a shiro is. Shiro, when you break out into song, is when you're just so moved, when you are so inspired, when you are so awestruck. That's when you break out into song. So to be able to be Torat Omer Shira, for there to be true Shira, you've got to be really moved and inspired, and you're not moved and inspired by the same old thing every day, no matter how wonderful it is. And everybody who's raised children knows that it is not easy to get the child to say thank you for dinner, thank you for breakfast, thank you for lunch, thank you for picking me up at school, thank you for paying for my school fees, thank you for giving me a vacation. Kids don't do that. They take it for granted because it's frequent, it's regular. And they think it's your job. So we think it's Hashem's job to take care of us on a daily basis. It happens every day. It's not easy to get inspired and poets do it. Some poets will write the most beautiful poetry and song, but you need to be a poet to be inspired by a sunrise or a sunset to write a song. We need, in order for there to be shira, in addition to there being thanksgiving, there also needs to be a sense of awe and wonder at something amazing that Hashem has done. And we see it in Chanukah, in Ala Nisim, where we say, Ulecha asita shem gadol v'kadosh ba'olamecha. Ribono shel Olam, not only La'amcha Yisrael asita tshuah gedola, not only did you cause a great salvation for us, for which we're eternally grateful, but you also made your name in the world. You did such a miracle that will be remembered forever. So you've got the two elements. You've got the awe and the wonder. Wow, there was a nes galui, there was an amazing miracle, and you did something to save us. And that's why in Chanukah you've got the two themes. We were saved from the Greeks. We won that war. That was a nes mor nista. That wasn't a nes galui to the same extent. And then you had the olive oil. You had the nes of the oil, which was an absolute miracle. That was a clear miracle, measurable miracle. There was no question about it. So the two go together, and that's why we say Hallel on Chanukah, because we have that sense of awe, and we have the sense of thanks. And then Rabbi of Ohr Ra'anan brings a comment in the name of his Rebbe, the Brisker Rov. Now, the Brisker Rov wrote two important pieces on miracles. One comes at the beginning of Hilchos Korban Pesach, and in our area, and the one comes in Hilchos Chanukah. In both of those places, he deals with miracles and Hallel. But here he quotes something from the Brisker Rov that he must have heard himself, where the Brisker Rov says in the name of his father, who's Reb Chaim of Brisk, looking at what happens if you know for sure there's going to be a miracle. Can you say Hallel before the miracle? Say a Novi comes, a prophet comes and tells you it's going to be a miracle tomorrow, it's going to be amazing. And you believe it completely. Can you say Hallel? And he says, no, Hallel has to come after the miracle. Even though it says in Tehillim, and I trusted completely in your kindness. I knew you were going to do a miracle, says David HaMelech. Yagel libi bishuatecha. But I give thanks to you once I experience your salvation. Even though I trust completely that there will be a miracle, my thanks is after I've experienced the miracle. So thanksgiving, Hallel, has to be experiential. Hallel can't be cerebral. Hallel has to be something that comes from your heart in response to something you've actually experienced. Ki gamal alai la'achar shegamal alai v'ainu la'achar hanes, az ashira lo. After the miracle, I will sing to Hashem. Shezehu din b'shira al hanes. The Brisker Rov said in the name of Reb Chaim, this is part of the rules, part of the principles that govern the saying of Hallel after a miracle. It has to be after the miracle. You have to have experienced the miracle, and then from the place of the miracle comes your desire to sing. She'ein omrim hashira ela la'achar hanes. You only say the shira afterwards. What that explains is the bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki hu lo yatsa miMitzrayim. So now we understand what the Haggadah says and what the Rambam paskins. Everybody has to see themselves as having come out of Egypt yourself. Because if you don't experience the salvation, you can't say the Shira. You can say the scripted Shira in shul the next day. But that's like reading a speech. And you've seen politicians and others who read their speeches, and it's not very effective. If they read from a teleprompter and you can't really see that they're reading, it's a little better. But the best is if they're able to be spontaneous and really express themselves. That's when they're best. I don't know if you remember, after 9/11, they scripted President Bush very, very carefully. They were worried. Everything he could say could cause panic, could cause war, could cause recession. So they scripted him terribly carefully. And he got to a point where he just said, leave this, I just need to talk. I just need to talk from my heart. And he just started to talk to people, and everything started to change when that happened. There was, I'm trying to think who it was, also a famous politician. It might have been, it was actually Golda Meir. To go to the States to raise money for the Yom Kippur War. It was a very serious time, and Israel needed arms and money. And she also had a very scripted speech, and she just said, look, I'm throwing it away. Let me just talk to you. As a mother, as a grandmother, as a person living in Israel, as a Jewish woman. And she just poured out her heart, and that's what made the difference. So that's the Pesach Hallel. Although we are reading from a teleprompter, it has to come from our heart. It's not the same as Hallel and Shul. Hallel and Shul, if it doesn't come from your heart, it's okay. You say the bracha, you say the words, you finish the Hallel, you've done what you have to do. You do it with music, with singing, you do it without singing, it doesn't matter. You've said it. It's a maaseh mitzvah, it's an act of mitzvah, just as you have to shake your lulav and you have to do it the right way. It doesn't matter how much emotion you put into the lulav. It really doesn't matter. You have to have the intention that you're doing the mitzvah, you have to do it correctly, and that's 100% done. You blow the shofar, it doesn't have to be with a whole lot of emotion. Once the shofar blow in Reb Chaim Soloveitchik's shul, the same Reb Chaim we're quoting here, burst into tears before he started blowing the shofar. And Reb Chaim said, what are you crying about? Do you cry before you put your tefillin on in the morning? Do you cry before you put on your tzitzis in the morning? Why are you crying? It's a mitzvah. Do the mitzvah and get on with it. You don't have to all stand here while you indulge yourself with your crying. We don't have to witness that. You just get on with it. And so it is with the Hallel of the morning. It doesn't have to be with emotion. If it's with emotion, that's fine, but it doesn't have to be. But the Hallel of Pesach night does have to be with emotion. The Hallel of Pesach night has to be like a genuine thank you, a genuine feeling of Hallel v'hoda'ah, praising Hashem and thanking Hashem for being saved. And that's how I explained to you why Hallel is the core of the whole thing, because now you understand why we've gone through the whole Seder. The whole Seder, which is designed to awaken in us that sense of having been present, using all our senses, our taste and our smell and our touch and our minds, using all of it. That's all in order, and that's why we get to this crescendo. After we've gone through the whole Sipur, we talk about the story, we reenact the story, some people act out the story. We go through the whole thing with the narrative in full description in order that we can get to this place of lefichach. That's why we have to do this, so that we can now say Hallel from a place of Shira and not from a place of Korin. We can say it, not read it. And that's what the Hallel is. That's the difference, the subtle but not so subtle difference between the Hallel that we say at the Seder table and the Hallel we say at Shul is it's not read, it's said. And it's said because we feel it, and we feel it because we've just lived through it. And this year we should feel it more than other years because we've lived through so much more. And the Rambam goes further. The Rambam adds a word, and he says, "B'chol dor v'dor chayav adam laharot et atzmo." The Rambam says not just lirot et atzmo, to see yourself as if you've come out of Mitzrayim. The Rambam says laharot et atzmo, which is where the Sfardim get it from, that you've got to act it out. And that's why they put something over their shoulders and they walk around as if they've been slaves. But it's based on the Rambam, that chayav adam laharot et atzmo. You must demonstrate yourself as having come out of Egypt. You've got to act it out as having come out of Egypt. It's not just a feeling, it's actually action. And then he adds the word, ki iluhu ba'atzmo yatsa ata mishibud Mitzrayim. You've got to feel as if you've just this minute come out of Shibud Mitzrayim. It's really hard. The Seder, Pesach Seder, is really hard. We think the hard part of Pesach is preparing for Pesach, and for the women mainly, that is the hard part. And then it's preparing the Seder, getting the house Pesachdik, preparing the Seder. Sometimes people have got a lot of people at their Sedorim. That's very difficult. That's nothing compared to these moments. As you're about to start Hallel, to check in with yourself and say, is this a read Hallel or a said Hallel? Is this Hallel I'm about to say coming from my heart because I've just been brought out of Egypt? Or am I going through a ritual? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? And the difference between those two is the difference between doing it correctly and not doing it correctly. So that's what the hard part of Pesach is. The hard part of Pesach, of the Seder, is not the physical part of it only. The real hard part of it is to check in with the inner place from which you're coming. Where am I at? What am I feeling? Am I really feeling that sense of salvation so much so that I can break out into shirah, I can break out into song and respond to the Ribono Shel Olam? And that's why interestingly, if you look at the Sforim that count the mitzvot and that go through each of the mitzvot of the Torah, the most important ones for us, the most used ones and quoted ones, is the Sefer HaMitzvot of the Rambam. The Rambam writes down the 613 mitzvot, and on mitzvah number 157, he says, Shetzivanu lesaper b'yetziat Mitzrayim. The mitzvah is to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim Belel Chamisha Asar B'Nissan, on Pesach night, B'tchilat halayla, at the beginning of the night, Kefit Sachut Lashon HaMesaper, each according to their ability to narrate and to speak. That's interesting. He says you need language. The speaker, the Bala Seder, it's not just about reading through the Haggadah. He's got to tell a story. He's got to tell, and you know what it's like when you hear a story from a good storyteller. It's beautiful and everybody loves it. It's not like the Seder night and everybody's looking at their watch and how much to go still to the meal and are we there yet? Is it finished yet? And it's a story. It's got to be, people should be sitting there, especially the children, with their eyes wide open as the Bala Seder, Kefit Sachut Lashon HaMesaper, should use all of his talents of storytelling to tell the story. V'chol ma sheyosif b'ma'amar, and the more he talks about it, v'yarich hadvarim b'agdalat ma she'asa lanu Hashem, and the more he expands on the great things Hashem did to us, u'ma she'asu imanu hamitzrim, and what the Egyptians did to us. Tell the whole story. Me'ol v'chamas, interesting, chamas, v'ech lakach Hashem nikmatenu mehem, Hashem punished them. Tell the whole story. U'v'hodot lo yitbarach al ma she'gemalanu michasadav. And thanking him for what he did is part of the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not that we have a section of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim and then we have Hallel. Hallel is the blended into the whole story. You need the story so as to be able to say the Hallel. It's not that first you do the story and now the after fact there's a Hallel added on at the end. No, the Hallel is the important thing. But in order for the Hallel to come from your heart, you need to relive the story. To relive the story, you need a storyteller. The Bala Seder should be the storyteller. One should choose who does the Haggadah on the basis of their capacity to entertain. Shimi, are you going to be a Bala Seder this year? You know, I can just imagine how you will enthrall the people there. They'll see it with all the drama and all the imitations of Paro and Moshe stuttering. I can just picture what your Sidorim must be like. And that's what one has to do. But it's uvahodot lo yitbarach al ma shegemalanu. And the Sefer HaChinuch, which is the other book of mitzvot, the Saper be'inyan yetziat Mitzrayil belecha mishasa b'Nissan, kol echad kefi tzachut l'shono. He quotes from the Rambam, everybody on that night, ula Hallel ula shabeach Hashem yitbarach al kol nisim she'asa lanu Hashem. That's mitzvah 21 in Parshat Bo. The mitzvah is to tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim and praise Hashem, because that's what the story is for. The reason you tell the mentioning of Yetzias Mitzrayim we do every night. The mentioning of Yetzias Mitzrayim we do every morning. It's not in order to remember it, we know it. We say it every day, twice a day. Pesach is to relive it. Pesach is to tell the story with all the powers of storytelling, so that the people at the Seder are able to get to a point where they want to say Hallel, they want to thank Hashem. Why the 14th? So we're saying Hallel on the 14th. This is the big Hallel day. Yes, we're going to say Hallel in Shul on the 15th, but that's Kriyat Hallel. That's just the reading of Hallel. This unusual Hallel, this authentic, spontaneous singing of Hallel, that's on the night. And in those days, it was on the day of the 14th. And for us, it's on the night of the 15th. Why before Pesach even starts? Why do we even bring the Korban Pesach a day before Pesach? Why do we have to clear the chametz out the day before Pesach? Normally, when a Yom Tov starts, the laws of the Yom Tov start at sunset, when the Yom Tov comes in. This is the only Yom Tov where the laws of the Yom Tov start well before. You're not allowed to have chametz before. You're not allowed to eat chametz before. We burn the chametz before. Why on the 14th? It's not Pesach yet. We'll look at two reasons to explain that. The one is, what happened on the 14th was a protest. We live in the time of protests. And the protest was that we took the God of Egypt and we slaughtered it. And we brought it as a sacrifice to our God. And that was done in public. Everybody saw that. So that was the beginning of the freedom. To be able to live your own religion without concern about what other people are going to be saying about that, that's what freedom is. We're not forcing it on other people. Each person can live their own religion, but we don't want ourselves to be restricted and embarrassed and inhibited in our keeping of our religion because of what other people might say. It's particularly worrying when our concerns are from our own people, when we're embarrassed about keeping our own Torah in our own land because of what certain people might think or feel, or that's when it becomes particularly sad. And then there isn't cherut, then there isn't freedom. Freedom is when we can do that and not worry about what. So that the slaughtering of the lambs and the bringing of the Korban Pesach was already an expression of freedom, which started on the 14th. But why the 14th? So there's a B'nai Yisachar, which we use very often in this shir, who says a very beautiful thing, and it's a principle of life that he touches on. And it's based on a halacha in the Shulchan Aruch in Yoredeh Siman Reish Samach Zayin, where you have to be quite careful if you plan to buy a non-Jewish slave. So if you have to buy an Eved Knani, you've got to be a little bit careful, because what the process is, there's a commercial transaction in the days that there used to be slaves, so you would pay the previous owner for the slave. Now you take the slave is going to become semi-Jewish. The slave is going to become chayev b'mitzvahs, he's going to become obligated to keep the mitzvot that the woman keeps, the mitzvot aseh, she has man gram aseh. In many ways, he's partly Jewish. For that, he has to go through a conversion process. So he goes to the mikveh. What happens if you put him into the mikveh, and when he comes out, he says, I went into the mikveh. In my head, I was doing it to become a Jew. A full, free Jew. That was what was in my mind. That would be a problem. He would then be a full, free Jew. So the Shulchan Aruch Paskins, based on the Gemara in Yevamos, you've got to make sure that while he's in the mikveh, he's serving you. He's got to be doing something for you in the mikveh, so that he can't say, I was in the mikveh for freedom purposes. You were serving me even while you were in the mikveh. So I'm not quite sure what kind of jobs you can give him to do while he's in the mikveh. You've got to be quite creative about it. But while he's in the mikveh, you've got to give him a job, because it's not binary. You can't have a situation where you finish being a slave to a non-Jewish owner, and then a minute later you become a slave to a Jewish owner. It actually has to be a kind of an analog transition, that you start becoming the servant of the new owner before you stop being the servant of the old owner, so that there's not a moment in between that could intervene, because you could drive a wedge into that moment and you could get your freedom. Says the Bnei Yisachar, the Rebbeinu Shalom also keeps the laws of the Torah. And therefore he did the same with us. He wanted to make sure that before he freed us, we were working for him. So on the 14th, he's going to free us on the 15th of Nissan. He gives us mitzvot on the 14th of Nissan. So it's specifically the day before Pesach that we've got to. So that hinei be'et hayetziah va'apedut hutal alehem avdut lishiyu kol yemei olam hem uvneihem ad olam avadim lo yitbarach shmo. So that the Jews can never say, yes, we were slaves to Paro, and you freed us. Now we're free. We never agreed to become slaves to you. No, the condition of your freedom was becoming a slave to me. In fact, you became a slave to me, says Hashem, before I even freed you. That was the first thing that happened. The sequence was slave to Paro, slave to me, then freedom. Because that's what freedom means. Freedom means slave to Hashem. Because we don't have the freedom not to be slaves. It's quite interesting. We will serve something. We are designed to serve. We are born to serve. We will serve. We can choose who to serve. We can serve our customers, we can serve our bosses, we can serve our country, we can serve our wives or our husbands, we can serve our children, we can serve our parents. And if we don't have anybody to serve, we will end up serving ourselves. We'll be self-serving. But we'll always be in service of something or someone. And Cherus is to be in service of the Creator of the world, to be in service of the highest order of being that there is. That's the freedom. There's never total freedom. The freedom is only, do I want to serve a created, or do I want to serve the Creator? And serving the Creator of everything is the freest we can become. But that can only happen after you're freed from Paro. But if you're freed from Paro and then you have your moment of freedom to choose which way to go, which way not to go, that could be terribly harmful, and one could make decisions not to go ahead with it. No, explains the Bnei Yisachar, that moment doesn't exist, because you're already in service to Hashem, bringing a Korban Pesach, while you're still officially a slave to Paro. You have not yet been released from slavery, but you're already serving Hashem. Now that you're serving Hashem, Hashem removes the slavery from Paro, and you emerge into being a servant of Hashem. And that's why the Gemara tells us, when we get to Shavuos, Kafa alehem har kegigit, we didn't have a choice about receiving the Torah at Sinai or not. We were already committed. That was the condition under which we were freed. We would never have been freed if we hadn't already been in service to Hashem. So that level of freedom we were never given, and we don't really possess. And that's a principle that applies way beyond Pesach. Sometimes we think we wait for the right opportunity to come, and then we're going to do something. And sometimes that's not the brightest of ideas. Sometimes you have to do it before the time comes, because the time never really comes. One just has to do it. It's a little bit like Nachshon and Yam Suf. Jews are standing at the sea, waiting for it to split, waiting for a miracle, waiting for something to happen. Nothing happens until Nachshon walks in. Then the sea splits. The Bnei Israel start serving Hashem. Then Hashem frees them from Paro. As long as you're standing and saying, I can't serve you, God, because I'm working all day for Paro, I don't have time, then there isn't going to be a cherus. When does the cherus come? When does the freedom come? After you've taken the step to be free. It's a little bit like coming on Aliyah. Some people, when was your day? Your Aliyah day? Actually today, Dr. and Mrs. Gift. Thursday you became citizens of Israel. There are times of time where you have to come. Is it the best time? So Chayrit Lavdut, or Avdut, Chayrit Lavdut, exactly. When is the best time? You don't know when the best time is. People who wait for the best time to go on Aliyah wait for a long, long time. And sometimes they make it in a coffin, and sometimes they don't even make it in a coffin, because there's never a right time. For major change in life, there's never an ideal time. There comes a point where you've got to say, I'm doing it now. I'm making this the time. And there are many things in life that some things you have to wait for the right time. Sometimes timing is critically important. But sometimes you've got to precipitate it. You've got to actually initiate it and make the time be the right time. It's the same thing with the things in life that you want to make. We talk about making time for something. There are some things that you have time for, and there's some things you have to make time for. There isn't time for it. If you go through, one of the things that many people are finding nowadays is that a to-do list is one of the most psychologically destructive things there is, because nobody gets through it. Nobody finishes them. Nobody gets to the end of the day and they've done their to-do list. If they are, they don't have enough to do. How can you finish your to-do list? So it just drives you crazy. Every day you get to the bottom of your to-do list and there's still a million things to do, and tomorrow starts a new day. It just drives people crazy. So there are different techniques and mechanisms. But there's some things on your to-do list which you have time to do. That's how life is. But there's some things you've got to make time to do. You have time to go to sleep. Eventually you're going to go to sleep. You have time to, eventually you're going to eat. You're going to have time for certain things. But there are other things that are important. They're just not urgent enough to have the time, as important as they are. And for those things, you've got to make time. For certain relationships, for certain friendships, for learning Torah, to take time to daven properly. There are all sorts of things you've actually got to create the time for. And that's one of the things we learn here, that there was a moment Bnei Yisrael had to come to a point where they didn't stop to wait for the Geula. They already began to act as if they were free, so that the Geula could be initiated. And that's the 14th of Nissan. That's why the 14th of Nissan is so important. If Pesach would start on the 15th of Nissan, it would be a Geula initiated by Hashem. The fact that we start on the 14th of Nissan is because that's when we initiated it. We created the conditions for it. We made it possible by doing the mitzvot that Hashem told us to be busy with, the Korban Pesach and Brit Milah, which we talk about in the Haggadah itself. The two mitzvot that we had to be occupied with. By being occupied with those mitzvot, we already established our status of freedom to which Hashem could then draw us and take us out into the real freedom the next day. And that's why there's a Rabbeinu Chananel in Psochim where he talks about the fact that if a person loses a close relative on Erev Pesach, Aninus doesn't fall. He doesn't become an onen. Because from midday on Pesach, Sha'at HaPesach, from the time of the Korban Pesach, which is half an hour after midday on Erev Pesach, Ke Yom Tov Chashuv, that's a Yom Tov. So 14th of Nisan already starts Yom Tov. The Sefer HaChinuch says the same, the Vilna Gaon says the same in Shulchan Aruch, and that's why we try and get finished with everything. This year it's easy because it's Shabbos, but on a normal weekday, Erev Pesach, we try to get finished Erev Pesach. Men aren't supposed to shave after that time. We try not to. A lot of the melachot that we don't do during Chol HaMoed, we already stopped doing at midday on Pesach, on Erev Pesach, because that's when the Yom Tov is actually starting. It's not the same Yom Tov as the 15th. The Yom Tov of the 15th is Hashem taking us out of Mitzrayim. The Yom Tov of the 14th are the things we did to create the conditions by which Hashem could take us out of Mitzrayim. And so that movement from the 14th in the morning, when we're slaves to Egypt, the Tertiv Para, 14th in the afternoon, where we're acting as though we're free, the 15th, becoming free, that's the whole process. The process doesn't start on the 15th, the process starts on the 14th. And that's why in the Musaf of the 15th, the first day of Pesach, in the Musaf, if you look in the Musaf, you'll see the reference to the Korban Pesach, which was yesterday, which was the day before. It's considered part of the service. It's considered part of the avodah of Pesach, of the first day Pesach. So that's where we get to with the roast lamb. Now is really important, and it's important not only because of the Pesach Seder itself, but it's important for its role in being a part of the Hallel v'hodaya. It's part of the Thanksgiving and the Hallel. It starts on the 14th. It is in fact the trigger of the whole Geula process. It's what sets it all in motion. And so starting on Erev Pesach at midday, when we get into the mood of the Korban Pesach, doing the mitzvot we need to do, right up to the Seder, when everything builds up to the Hallel. And the Hallel is the moment, because we've relived it all, we can sing from our hearts and feel an authentic, spontaneous desire to lahodot, to Hallel, to thank Hashem and to praise Hashem, to thank Hashem for what we benefited and to praise Hashem for the awe and inspiration of the greatness of His miracle. That forms the totality of this mitzvah of Seder Pesach, starting at midday on the 14th and ending in the night of the 15th. So wishing you all a wonderful Pesach, and I hope that this adds a new dimension to your Seder, and that you'll alert the people at your Seder Make sure the story is inspiring and not boring, and make sure that when you get to Hallel, you check in with yourself and just say, can I really feel that I want to say to the Ribono Shel Olam, thank you for what you've done for me, not just for us, for me. Where would I be without you? Where would I be had I not been taken out of Mitzrayim as well? All the best to you and good Yom Tov.